unprecedented arraignment less than 48 hours away. At this time tomorrow, Trump is expected to be in New York ahead of the hearing. And here's how Tuesday will shake out. At about 11 a.m., he'll arrive at the courthouse where Trump will be fingerprinted and photographed. At 2:15, the arraignment begins, and it could last as little as 15 minutes. Then Trump flies back to Mar-a-Lago, where he will speak publicly about the indictment against him. His attorney making this bombshell announcement earlier today.
We will take the indictment. We will dissect it. The team will look at every potential issue that we will be able to challenge, and we will challenge. And of course, I very much anticipate a motion to dismiss coming because there's no law that fits this.
Now, the details of the indictment are typically under seal before the arraignment takes place, but there are reports that Trump will face as many as 34 charges.
If the charges are exclusively along the lines of the reporting before I came on, it'll be a Class E felony, and there is a upward range that involves prison and a downward range, as you noted, that involves no prison whatsoever. So that's what we have to wait and see. Really, only District Attorney Bragg knows what the evidence is.
So if the charges are related to the hush money scandal, Trump's legal team and many others, including former Attorney General Bill Barr, say that doesn't amount to a campaign finance violation.
The case lacks any legal basis. It's pursuing somebody on the. There's nothing inherently wrong or illegal about making a hush payment. They're saying he falsified the corporate record. But for that to even be a misdemeanor, you have to be trying to defraud somebody. And it's unclear exactly who was defrauded. This is his own company. From the federal standpoint, the idea that this was a campaign finance violation is simply wrong. It's wrong on the law.
So we're going to expand on this idea of intent to defraud. And Andy, I'll go to you on this because this is a really important point.
Yeah, it sure is. The way that most people, I think, who, especially non-lawyers, you would say if the charge is falsifying business records and they have something in there that does not represent the reality of the business transactions, isn't that falsifying business records? But that's not how we read statutes. This statute, aside from saying causes something to be false, also has the added element where it says you have to have an intent to defraud. So it's not enough to just show that there's something in the records that's false. You have to, in addition, as the prosecutor, prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was an intention by doing the false entry to commit a fraud. This isn't all, I don't think it's all that different from, in federal cases, which we've talked about a lot over the years, and it's not enough in a false statements case to make a false statement, right? We have this whole thing about materiality. You have to show that it was not only that it was false, but it had some thread of importance to the investigation. Here in the state, what they're essentially saying is it's not enough to just have a false entry. You have to show that he was trying to commit a fraud. So what'll happen in the case is the government, as it typically does, will try to have a very expansive interpretation of what fraud means. So it'll be like anything that you could do that would be deceptive, which almost gets you to the point of if it's false in the records, then it's fraud, right? And the defense will want a more common sense interpretation of what fraud is, which is you're trying to basically get money or property out of someone by a ruse or out of something. And that's important because there's no allegation here that anyone has heard of before that the Trump organization or Trump himself committed any kind of tax evasion or purloined any financial gain out of this. Mm-hmm. So they'll want that interpretation of fraud.
Right, yeah, and his team has been making that point as they've been making the rounds. And again, we haven't seen the indictment, and everyone is waiting for that, but we have heard quite a bit about it, and through our own reporting, including other agencies as well, know that there's likely 34 charges, right? And take a listen to what Alan Dershowitz, Harvard law professor emeritus, had to say. He's accusing someone in maybe the DA's office or the grand jury likely leaking information about the indictment. Listen.
Never in the history of America has anybody ever paying for an NDA done that, and never in the history of America has anybody ever been indicted for not doing that. Right. I don't think any right-thinking person will tell you that this indictment would have occurred but for the fact that the man's name is Donald Trump. Not that he's a past president, but that he is a potentially future president running against the head of the party, the Democrats. It's very likely that the reason we know about this indictment, and how come we know about it, hadn't been made
Right.
public, is because somebody either in the DA's office or in the grand jury probably leaked this, which is a more serious felony. As far as I know, there's been no investigations of the leak.
Conch, I'll go to you. Fair point by Mr. Dershowitz.
Very fair point. Where's the investigation, right? And we saw it so often, Molly knows this from her book, leaks out of the FBI, right, about certain allegations against Donald Trump. It got Andy McCabe fired, I believe, right, for leaking to the Wall Street Journal. Now he has a cushy job at CNN. Story for another time. But this is all to win in the court of public opinion, right? It's to embarrass the former president, who is now a presidential candidate. And when you hear 34 counts, right, Andy? Boy, that sounds pretty ominous, but it could be a matter of count stacking. But I have a question for Andy, if that's okay. If this case fails, and you, Jonathan Turley, almost every legal analyst that I see on TV, even on other networks that don't like Donald Trump very much, say that this is a very leaked case. Does it have any impact on the Georgia case, for example? Because once you fail here in that court of public opinion, it looks like you're just going after the guy until something sticks.
You know, look, Joe, every trial, every criminal trial is a jury trial.
Right.
You know, there's what the law says, and then there's getting a jury unanimously to agree that it's been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Trump's approach to all these cases is going to be that the Democratic Party, as it has been doing since 2016, when the law enforcement and intelligence apparatus of the government was put in the service of the Hillary Clinton campaign, they're going to say this is just the next chapter of it, and that they are using their government power in a partisan fashion to go after someone that they regard as their arch nemesis. That's a powerful argument if they play into it by bringing a very weak case that turns out to fall flat.
It's interesting. It seems so much like the first impeachment trial of President Trump, right? Where you knew the ending. The Senate wasn't going to vote 2/3 of it anyway to remove the president. It was all about fomenting chaos and to bring a very negative light around Donald Trump by impeaching him. I just feel like this is the same way. It'll eventually fail, but maybe winning the case isn't the goal. Weakening Trump may be the goal.
Well, and the big question right now also is, will this even go to trial? And if that happens, what will that look like? Today, James Trusty, former attorney for the president, former president, says that he doesn't believe a gag order will happen. Listen.
I think he'd comply, but I also don't think it's going to happen. I mean, you're talking about, one of the reasons he's being politically persecuted is he's running for president against somebody who unleashes DOJ against him during the election season. So I think it would be very difficult for a judge to impose a gag order on a person running for president. You talk about having a profound effect on this country. A gag order would do just that.
Well, Molly, and he makes the point, it would be difficult for someone running for president, but particularly difficult if it would be former President Trump.
Oh, absolutely. And we did see a lot of these gag orders during the Russia collusion hoax when various people were indicted. And it did make it difficult to talk about it. In this case, it's good that they say that they think it's unlikely to have it happen, but it's why so many people are bothered about this. Not just that former President Trump is a former president, or that these charges all seem very trumped up, but also he is currently far and away the top person in the Republican primary for running for the next presidency. And he has tons of support. More than half of the Republican voters are already saying that they're behind him. He raised like $4 or $5 million in the 48 hours after this indictment was leaked, or it was announced. And so this is something that is a lot about election tampering. We cared so much during the Russia collusion hoax, that thing where Hillary Clinton falsely claimed that it was legal expenses, that where she spent millions to create the Russia collusion hoax, that it was a legal expense. During that period of time, we had so many problems here with election interference. This is massive election interference, right?
Could I just add to what Molly's saying on this also? Every day we're going to have something like this because they've decided to intrude law enforcement into electoral politics on what seems to be a flimsy basis. The proposition that a court can tell not just the lawyers who it controls as a member of the bar, right, but the litigants that they have to stay silent about what's going on in the case is a very dicey proposition under the First Amendment and almost never done in most cases. So the thought that you would not only cross that Rubicon, but do it in connection with a guy who's running for president,
Right.
and as Molly says, is now the leading contender, at least for now, on one side, is just, it's mind-boggling, but it's just what we're going to get every day as we're in this crazy land.
Here we are, right?